Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. We are Brew Minds. I'm Jesse.
I'm Tom.
And tonight we're joined by the Charlie Tonic Hour, Charlie and Ginny Tonic. So
Hello.
Hey. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
No problem. So the reason why we wanted to have you guys on tonight, besides picking your brain about bourbon, distilleries, and all things barrel aged goodness, we hear you guys have done something pretty awesome lately. I believe 300th episode.
300th episode. 300th episode, and never missed a Wednesday out of those 300. So it's been a solid run of never missing. So
once a week, right?
Yeah,
once a week.
Every Wednesday.
We've done it weekly since January 2012.
Was that 4 or 5 years?
Yeah.
That's incredible. We've been at this for like 3 months. I'm like, man, we've done a lot more than we haven't done anything.
Yeah, we're trying to hit that every other Tuesday right now. And that's work. Like how? I guess that's would be my first question. Is like how are you able to keep it with such a regular pace? Because I know from like when I was in journalism, just like showing up and writing every day, it's a slog doing the same thing every week.
Occasionally allow quality to fall. No.
Oh, we're getting really honest, really quick here. Okay. All right, I'm ready. No, I mean Charlie definitely pushes it. He's taken it as kind of a point of pride.
Yeah, consistency is
So
everything.
I think I've been the one sometimes where we're like, it's been a really busy week and I don't really know what we're going to talk about, and he's always the one that's just like, nope, we're not going to do it. And of course, he always brings it up. We recorded a very short show. His stepfather passed away, and it was on a Wednesday. So we
was this years ago?
Yeah.
Just to show the level of dedication.
So he did it kind of early on, where he's like, no, I'm just going to do a show. I'm going to remember my my stepfather, and we're going to talk about it. And so we did a short show. And he still managed to get it up. And so, like, nothing I've ever brought up as an excuse can ever keep him. So he's just like, no.
My stepfather died and we still had a show.
Exactly. I don't care that we're hungover. We're doing the show. I think probably the craziest thing to do consistency is to actually go out and announce that you're doing 3 shows instead of 1, just to see if you can. It'll make one show look easy.
Well, for both of us and for everyone at home, can you kind of like tell us a little bit about what Charlie Tonic is, like how it kind of came to be, and what you've grown the show into being?
Well, there's sort of what Charlie Tonic is today.
Today, and what it was yesterday. Yes, because it just changed.
It's always been an alcohol-infused culture podcast.
Right.
We always have done a drink segment, and interviewing bartenders and distillers and brewers have always been a big part of what we do because it's just something we're very passionate about.
Right.
It's something that we're interested in. But we've always also given ourselves room to talk about other things like, remembering your stepfather, or, we went to see the new Wonder Woman movie. What did we think of that?
Yeah.
So basically we've decided that from now on we will be all alcohol focused.
Yes.
So it is still a culture podcast. We're still interested in talking not just about reviewing products or how to make drinks. We're also interested in talking about
societal implications.
Yeah,
of alcohol culture.
what are some trends that we're seeing? How is drinking different in different cultures or different subgenres? We're so big geeks, I'm sure we'll do like a Dungeons and Dragons and drinking kind of a show, but there'll always be alcohol brought in.
I'd like to show up for that one.
Oh, absolutely. Like some upcoming topics we've been kicking around is kind of like batch cocktails for tailgating. Also talking about things like the bartender handshakes, those cocktails that are kind of indicative to the bartender industry and what they kind of share with each other, Fernets, things like that. So there's a lot of different things that we're going to approach it from a very, we are narrow casting so that we can get a wider audience so they actually understand what the hell our show's about, but we're also still catching a wide net in terms of the societal way in which alcohol kind of enters all our lives. And
how did you guys get started in all this? Like, what made you decide, like, let's do a podcast?
I got tired of the last show I did 300 episodes on.
So, this is his second podcast.
So podcasting started in 2005, and I came out of being a general manager for a radio station in Lexington, Kentucky. And when I stopped that a couple years later, I still wanted to have that radio experience. So I heard about this new thing called podcasting, and I actually started podcasting in 2008. So I was very early in the podcasting years, and I was doing a very niche show where I was interviewing up-and-coming comic creators, and I got really tired of interviewing up-and-coming comic creators after 300 episodes, so I wanted a show where I could talk about anything with a really incredible co-host who became the primary host. So
he pitched it to me. I'd never podcasted before, but...
Well, it's just so great to be able to sit down and have these conversations.
Yeah, I love it.
I'll drop into social media and everything. We're just going so fast every day, and everything you post is just so minute. And you don't get a chance to kind of get down in the details.
Yeah.
But I totally empathize with the not wanting to interview the comic creators so often, because there's only so many ways that you can write about a brewery opening or get the same quotes time after time, and it can get to be a chore.
You gotta twist it up.
Just as a little on the side, I do, for everyone at home, we've changed up a little stuff on how we've done on Brew Minds. We're working with the new camera, but we also have a new feature, and hopefully advertisers out there will take note of this. We now have a second camera where we can do product shots.
Yes.
So tonight we're starting out by drinking Surly's Cynic Ale, and Ginny is having a gumball head.
Nice.
So we've got some other fun stuff behind the bar that we're gonna break out a little bit later, but I'm geeking out right now because I'm loving it. We've got new toys to play with, and this is a lot of fun. So we'll go back to the main shot.
So
but,
now that you guys have hit 300 episodes, you've got some changes coming. So what's in the future for Charlie Tonic Hour?
Well, the Charlie Tonic Hour, pretty much the narrow casting down to alcohol is the only really big change. I mean, we're still going to open the show talking about things that are going on in Cincinnati, which because we are who we are, tends to relate to alcohol usually anyway. But it's kind of food and events things. We'll have a main discussion segment where it'll be kind of society and culture meets alcohol. We're still going to do a bottoms up segment, which is more of like a product review or us trying a specific cocktail, and it'll be very narrow in that scope. And then we'll end with 2 recommendations, one from each of us of things that are coming up in the next 7 days in the city that we are actually going to go do, and you can be a part of kind of experiencing it with the Charlie Tonic Hour.
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's kind of going to be the framework of the new version of the show.
And if you just want the bottoms up segment, if you're just interested in reviews or learning more about a specific spirit or a specific product, we are going to break out that bottoms up into its own podcast, so that you can get that separate also.
Yeah.
So that way, kind of like the cam idea, if we have somebody that like, hey, we're reviewing your product, or you're sent us something to review, we can send it to you, and then it's just that. They don't have to tell their listeners. They have to, skip forward to the 45-minute mark to hear their product. So.
That's the second of 3 podcasts. That'll come out. So Charlie Tony comes out every Wednesday. The bottoms up segment, which will contain the bottoms up that was in the show, which is the product review, it will be an extended version of that. So we'll actually have some additional audio, maybe some additional recommendations, more about the product. That'll be the Friday show. The short shot of alcohol to kick off your weekend. Where the other is an hour, this is going to be probably about 15 to 20 minutes max. It'll be a very short show just to give you something to try this weekend. Awesome. And that's 2 of 3 podcasts we're now doing.
What are all the 3 podcasts?
Okay, so then the third one that we announced last night, which will be coming out November 1st, is a podcast I'm doing. It's not alcohol related. It's called Remeasured Life, and it's about interviewing people who've changed their lives drastically.
Well, isn't that kind of what happened with you? I'm assuming that's the genesis of the show.
That was
a teacher.
I was a teacher, and I was.
And now you get to teach us about all these.
Exactly.
Things,
yeah.
Better.
So just that experience of having the long years of knowing that your life needed changing, but feeling like you're stuck and you can't make that change, and then going through the process of gradually changing it and coming out on the other side and going like, actually, I did it, things are better, and just wanting to talk to other people who've had that experience and give a little inspiration for other people who might be in the same situation. So
can you tease out any of your first guests? Or?
Well, because I can't get away from alcohol completely, of course, Chuck Cowdrey is going to be in season 1. He's a big bourbon writer. I'm really excited to talk with him. I'm probably going to be talking to a few people who are opening restaurants or new businesses. The pilot episode that is up now on the website is a friend of mine. She's not alcohol related, but she's a graphic designer who immigrated here from Peru, basically because that was the only way she could pursue the career that she wanted to. That she had to move to a new country to do that. So
that's a pretty drastic change.
Yeah.
Get a whole new start in your life.
And this one will be produced a little differently, and where the other two are weekly podcasts and will be every week, this one is going to be done in kind of NPR style with seasons. So she's got the pilot episode up right now, and in November it'll run about 9 episodes per season. So in November and December, season 1 will run weekly on Mondays, and then there'll be a break, and we'll come back for season 2.
Yeah. So how do you guys? And this is a little inside baseball.
Yeah.
How do you break it up into seasons? Like is it
I'm figuring that out.
kind of like a
Yeah.
TV schedule?
I've got a month to make that work. We have no time.
Yeah. We did well. I mean, the season format was really good because we are doing 2 weekly shows, essentially,
Right.
and we couldn't really take on a third full on, but we wanted to do this. The kind of the concept here in the season format is it allows you to kind of build a theme, and she's kind of working on what the theme is going to be for season 1 right now. But there will be an overarch probably to what the nature of these interviews.
That's kind of
Yeah.
what I was curious
Yeah.
about with doing the other 2 podcasts and
Yeah.
everything. That's like kind of a lot to take on, but
Uh-huh.
you know, it is interesting to do like kind of, you could almost call it a story arc.
Yeah.
with
Right.
everything. So,
Right.
no, I like that. Have you guys, as we've kind of been doing live casts and video casts, how much have you guys kind of been experimenting with that, or what have you learned?
You
kind of
know,
from
it
that?
was about we've been doing these live shows about once a month at the Overlook Lodge, and it was about 2 live shows ago. I just decided, hey, let me just Facebook Live this.
Yeah, it was
And
actually
it
because
was a whim.
a friend
It was
of
just
ours was going to come and he was sick, and I was like, we've been thinking about trying to figure out how to
so let's just throw it up so he can watch.
Facebook Live stuff anyway.
And
So
we
it's
got
a
a
good excuse.
tremendous response from that first live, and then of course I know how to grab off Facebook and threw it up on YouTube and build a YouTube channel, and now we're getting HD cameras and lighting effects and everything else for the house. So
Yeah, when you guys posted about your YouTube channel, I think it was like last week, I went like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. Started making updates to our channel. Like,
yeah, I was tweaking all kinds of things. Yeah, I noticed we got a follow from Brew Minds immediately. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, thank you. It's like 11.
they were like 18.
Yeah. You need 100 to get a
Gotta
vanity
start somewhere.
URL. That's my big goal, is to get to the vanity URL.
Okay, I knew you needed more for that.
Yeah.
And you need like 10,000 views to get advertising revenue on YouTube.
exactly. But we'll get there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it started on a whim like a month ago, 2 months ago, and now we're basically streaming almost everything. So we've got a light set up, and it's our kitchen table with a nice background at home, and we're just every time we record, we're just throwing on the video, and it's gotten increasingly complex every week.
Yes, I'm sure you feel honored to be in Brew Minds
the studios. Yes.
So, yeah.
I mean, we do the exact same thing. Every week there's like some new thing. We got this camera like 2 weeks ago. We just
Yeah.
got this little camera set up tonight.
That's awesome.
We need to get the lighting. We need to get microphones. It's just add a little bit at a time,
Well, now the house is sold, so
Yeah.
money.
Exactly. Get rid of your condo, so.
Yeah, it's great.
So, you guys were all about distilleries and bourbon. What can you tell us about the explosion in local distilleries and all the fun that's coming out of that?
I'd say craft distilling is probably like 10 to 15 years behind craft brewing. So it's been, I think there was a lot of people, in fact, that's, who said, hey, look at all these craft breweries starting, but I'm into spirits. I bet I could start a spirits distillery. It took a long time for the laws to catch up to people being able to do that. Actually, the law just changed in Ohio to allow distilleries to have essentially tap rooms, to be able to have a restaurant or a bar attached to them to sell their own products. So they have made it easier for people to start distilleries in Ohio and to get the A3A license that they use. So you're starting to see a whole lot more coming around, but it's also very different from brewing, because you can't really practice distilling at home.
Well,
you can.
Yeah.
It's not legal.
I run a home brewing group, and there was somebody selling a water distiller
Yeah,
last
exactly.
week.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a water pipe. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
He's
exactly.
like, you can
Yeah.
make some great distilled water for your home brew. Like, yeah. But it's also a lot more expensive for the license, right?
It is a lot more expensive for the license and for the not to get too technical, but at least in Ohio is a control state. So
Right.
we cannot, as a distillery in Ohio, we can't sell our products directly. It goes through the state.
Right.
And even the stuff that we're selling at the even at the restaurant, it's still from the state. We still have to buy everything
Back from them.
that we made. So we actually take our cases to the state's warehouse, check them in, take them back, bring them back to our distillery. So anything we sell at our, the bottles we sell at our bottle shop, or the things, we're not getting that nice break on the profit margin for what we sell for ourselves. So
in fact, it's exactly opposite.
Is there still a minimum markup on it, and the state's taking that markup?
Essentially, 56% of the bottle of a spirit that you buy in Ohio goes back to the state of the price. So it's a very it's a high volume.
That just
product,
seems ridiculous that you have to take it and then check it in and then
yes.
That's
and especially talking to like
sense.
distillers from other states who try and come into Ohio, the way that you have to have a marketing plan, you have to show how much you're going to invest in the state, the hoops you have to go through to come into Ohio is even more complex. And when you watch somebody actually break down between the federal and state the taxation issues that come into it, it's amazing we have a booming distillery market at all. Because it's just the cuts and the tears and the ways in which they get pennies on the product. It's tough.
Yeah.
Is there any movement on changing that? I know it seemed like the state went through and made some changes here in the past few months. I know they deleted a bunch of stuff from their
They did,
accounts.
yeah. They've changed the people who are running that division of the Jobs Ohio is now the ones who are kind of running the wholesale. And so they've changed some of the rules, not exactly, the laws are still the same, it's just how people are interpreting them, I think, has been a little bit loosened. So there's been some things that have been nice. I am now able to sell and deliver, because I am a sales rep, full disclosure. So I work for Middle West Spirits, which is a distillery in Columbus. And for the first time, I'm able to bring the bottles myself and sell them to them. Only the small distilleries in Ohio are allowed to do that. It still is a state sale, but it's essentially a sale through our state agency rather than through the local state agency.
Right.
So that helps as far as, I don't have to go to their local agency and say, pretty please, will you order this product in because so-and-so wants to, and it could be like a 2 or 3 week process of trying to work with the agency to get the product in, to get the bartender to order it, to get,
I'd have to imagine that would make doing events just impossible.
Yeah, it can be a challenge.
Yeah.
So that's nice in Ohio, and there's definitely been more awareness of with the delisting that some of the smaller that wasn't affecting us so much, but some more likely the ones that are out of state that are the smaller, the agricole rums or the interesting Fernets or the things that the real only a small number of people in Ohio are really interested in. Getting a little bit more flexibility as far as getting those in and changing the way that that's regulated. But.
So what did, if I can interject, what did you bring us tonight?
Let's get right to the drinks. That's the
Before we
important
get to the
part.
drinks, I got one quick comment.
Okay.
Just one quick comment. And that is, the one thing is, my God, celebrate your Cincinnati-based bartenders and bars, because the way that, because of delisting and things and the way we're already limited in the alcohols that we can have compared to, say, Kentucky, if you're a Cincinnati-based bartender and you are having a successful mixology career or whatever you're doing, compared to you're doing it with your one hand tied behind your back compared to just across the river, and that it's a very interesting mix to watch what we can work with here versus what they can work with over there. And just I ascend up to Cincinnati, the fact that our kind of our bar scene is so strong with limited resources sometimes is interesting.
And actually, and really, you could do a whole series on the interesting state law. Every state, their alcohol law is completely different, and there's always little intricacies. And Kentucky's better in some ways, but they can also be worse in some ways too. But.
Well, then how would you guys say that we, as a city, rate against other cocktail towns, like the New York or Vegas? I would assume is a cocktail
I
town.
don't even know any cocktail towns.
Well, I think but that's one of the things that's happened with the cocktail revolution, and we were talking with David Wondrich a couple years ago, and he's a big cocktail writer. You can find craft cocktail stuff in every city in the United States right now. Maybe not to the extent, but it's definitely been a switch that's been flipped as far as people kind of expect that you know how to make a cocktail now, which wasn't always the case. It used to be, kind of a niche thing that people would know really how to make, a Sazerac or something like that. But now it's become a lot more standard. So I'd say Cincinnati is it's definitely holding its own, just like with a lot of the restaurants and things. We're starting to be able to see creativity and new things coming out. And I think also, especially with guerrilla cinema, I think one of the real strong things about Cincinnati is the experience side of it. It's not just about a craft thing. It's also about people are getting a lot more creative as far as what is the whole experience of going into the bar like.
I think being very honest with the city, I think we are really strong in certain pockets. I wouldn't call us a great craft cocktail city. I would say we have really strong cocktail bars where that's what they are. Right. But I think you certainly have other cities that are stronger than us, but I think we do really damn well. And if you find the right people and you find the right niches in the city, you're going to have some really incredible cocktails that I would put up against anywhere else in the United States. I think
because there's already people, because the whole craft cocktail movement is getting a little bit to the point where people are no longer looking back and looking at more and more complicated ingredients, and more ingredients are starting to now say, okay, we've gone pretty far in one direction, it's starting to go back the other as far as getting into more simple ingredients, getting away from maybe like highly serious, highly bitter, complex cocktails, getting back maybe into some fun cocktails, maybe re-examining some of the kitschy cocktails from the 50s and that kind of thing. So.
Well, we can pause for a second.
Now back to the transition. Yes.
Well, we have to pause for station identification. If you're just joining us, you're watching Brew Minds, and we're here with the Charlie Tonic Hour. And now we're going to talk about these local spirits. Yeah. So what have you got for us?
Okay, so I brought 3 things with us today, and I will probably recommend starting with the rum as far as flavor goes. So the Second Sight rum. Second Sight is... it's a little treasure here in Ludlow, Kentucky. I love the people who run it. They're great guys, and it's a really great story. They are people who used to work for Cirque du Soleil. They were the guys who created the sets for the big shows in Vegas. So,
were they from the Covington, Ludlow area originally?
They're from Kentucky originally.
That's so interesting.
And they were friends growing up. And ended up working together on the show in Vegas, and one of them was a mechanical engineer. I'm going to mess up their story a little bit, but they were the technical side. They weren't the flipping somersaults side. But, so creating these massive set pieces, and had always, decided once that kind of wrapped up, they wanted to start a distillery. So they came back to Ludlow, Kentucky, and they made their own still. And the still has this great
This was after they had their license, right?
Yes. Yes. Well, that's the other thing. If you want to get into starting a distillery, and you want to buy a still, so many people have had that same idea recently. You go to Vendome or some of the big still makers.
Good luck.
They're going to tell you, okay, give us your $100,000 and you'll get it in 2 years. It's a really long wait list. So they ended up actually making their own still.
And $100,000 is crazy. I mean, is that like bare minimum entry price, or is
that's probably not the cheapest one, but I mean, 50 to 125 probably is.
I think $100,000 you can probably get yourself like a 3-barrel system for beer, including fermenters. I'd
say more than that. Maybe 5.
But so they're still, because you see the label, it's got this really nice like Swami guy on it. It's kind of their logo.
And it's so funny. So we were dealing with a marketing rep for alcohol and interviewing him about what that was like, because he was like branding rep, and we were over in his office and he was designing the label at the time. And eventually we met the guys for Second Sight. So we've seen this label from conception all the way through finished product.
Yeah.
Now, how long have they been open now? Because I remember it's been more than a year.
Was it their second year anniversary?
Second anniversary, I believe.
So there still has a turbine on it. And I have to admit, there's a lot of small distilleries, and they're not all very good. And that's been something that people have been burned on craft spirits.
I wish more people would say that about craft beer.
Yeah.
I don't want to hate on my local breweries, but...
Oh, I will.
Not everything.
She's told me not to, but I will.
Not everything out there is good, and we shouldn't be running around saying that it is.
Yeah.
We do a disservice to the distillery, the brewery, and our consumers.
Yeah, and it can be awkward because somebody invites you in, and they're so proud, and they're like, "Here's our stuff," and you're like, yeah. That's
I
your
pray
stuff.
you're better when I check back with you in a year.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I don't think it's called the Airbnb factor, but I was reading an article about that if you personally know or have interacted with the people that either own the place or are running it, you are far less likely to give a factual or fair review. You're going to make it positive.
Very
Oh,
true.
yeah, that makes sense.
So,
So I was very pleasantly surprised because when I went there and they told me that they built their own still, I was a little skeptical. But I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
They use real molasses as the base for their rum, which is not the most common thing. A lot of rum distillers will just use, sugar, like table sugar. So this, I think, has been one of the reasons that it does have such a great flavor.
I'll have to admit, like normally I'm not a rum fan, and that is far more drinkable than any rum I have drank straight up. So.
Yeah.
I tell you, if you want to become a rum fan, a hidden treasure in the city is go down to the Tiki Nights that happen at Japs that Jeremy Harrison runs, and his crew there, and my God, it'll convert you on rum. That guy,
Well, no, I like rum in things. But
Yeah, sure.
drinking
It's
rum.
not
Drinking
usually
rum
a
straight,
straight
yeah.
rum.
Yeah.
So yes, it's just their silver, kind of the straight one. They do a nice spiced rum. They do a barrel finished. They had a really good like smoked cherry like flavored rum. It was really good. So
As an aside, what is your guys' take on the Kraken? Because we treated it when I was younger as a punishment liquor, but entirely because it said Kraken on it.
Yeah,
and it spoke to our nerd sensibilities.
well, there is.
We come from steampunk roots, and Kraken is kind of like the official steampunk rum. Like
Really?
they swear by it in that community.
Yeah, it's a weird niche thing. That's I think because it's got they're really into airships and a lot of octopus imagery in the steampunk community.
Yeah, so it's
I
They
never
really
would have
like it.
known.
yeah,
That's
that,
incredible.
that's a huge angle that they have, which I don't think Kraken has even realized it to the extent that is like the exclusive rum of that subculture. But I don't. It doesn't stand out to me, quite honestly. It's not. It's it's a dark rum. It's like a lot of the other
It's
mainstream-
spiced and yeah.
I don't have a. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I'd be as likely to reach for Captain Morgan as that.
Right.
And that tells you about where it is. It's kind of. I look at it a little bit like I look at Budweiser when it comes to beer. I don't know. I'm sorry, there are better rums out there.
No,
Yeah.
by all means, like I said,
Yeah.
it was a punishment liquor for us.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I always it just popped to mind.
Yeah.
So you said Second Sight has been around for 2 years now.
I believe so. Yeah.
Do you know how many local distilleries we're up to now?
So I was looking today before I came over. So Northside Distilling, they have been around for a fair amount of time now. I think they're probably about three or 4 years now. Just opened their new facility in downtown Cincinnati. So they're not in Northside anymore.
Right next to Shook's there. Yeah.
Woodstone Creek was probably the oldest Cincinnati distillery. Really small, kind of mom and pop setup. Shumrick and Lay's, which I had to look up more information about today. I just heard of them earlier this year and had not got around to actually visiting or trying them yet. So didn't want to. And then I'm going to count New Riff in that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
For sure.
Just across the
Cincinnati
bridge.
area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Is there
Boone
what, 4
County.
years now? New Riff?
They'll be they're 3 years right now.
Oh, okay.
It'll be 4 years next year. They're about a year away
I
from
think
their
if you
first
can
whiskey
see it
being
from
out.
OTR, it counts.
Yeah. Boone County has a distillery, and
I've been excited to try that. Like at work, I've heard a lot of good things. Like I have a lot of coworkers who live down there, and they're all very excited for that place.
yeah, they seem to be good people. Right now, their product that's out is sort of like the OKI, that it's from the Seagram's or from the MGP from
Source.
Lawrenceburg.
Yep.
But I think their plan is to produce. I believe they have been producing and putting stuff back. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's.
but yeah, and the barrels they picked have been really good.
That actually will lead us into a question we had. It's kind of twofold. One, how hard is it for a new startup distillery to source barrels, or how does that process kind of work? And then two, like how long? Because I know a lot of places open up with your vodka, your rum, and a white dog. But how long do you have to wait before you can have bourbon?
So
any
there's
sort of whiskey?
So the first answer to the first question, how hard is it to source barrels? It's again like with the stills, with everything else, it's getting harder every day. It used to be that you could probably go to a lot of other distilleries and pick out barrels pretty easily that had a decent age, had a decent flavor to them. Now most of those barrels are under contract. So if you go to them right now and say I'd like to purchase something today, they might have something that's maybe 2 years old for you. It's not going to be
Now, are
as
those
high
all
quality.
first use barrels?
Yeah, bourbon has to be first use. So yeah, and there's also the barrel shortage. Everything is getting a little bit shorter supply. Although the barrels, I think we got a little panicky a couple of years ago. Like, will there be enough barrels? Will there be enough oak? But I think that's been settled down now. It's like we're not going to run out of barrels. But yeah, so that can be difficult.
I mean, yeah, if you think about the overall process, my God, I mean, so they're taxing the hell out of you. You're in a control state. Then also you factor in, you're starting in something that, especially if you're getting into bourbon, you've got to wait a few years for you to have products. So you're working with White Dog, you're working with rums, you're working with whatever you can make in the meantime, just to keep yourself a cash flow, to get yourself to the point where you want to be. So we talk about sourcing. A lot of people are critical of distilleries that source, but you got to get your foot going somehow. You've got to find a way to make money to survive until you get to the point where you are producing your own product. And I don't give a lot of flack to source.
It's
Something I've always thought, you can't legally practice it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I mean, I've brewed like 30 homebrew batches, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have made a whole bunch of wine at home. You can't legally distill anything, so it's not like
Exactly.
you can learn how to operate a still.
Right.
I'm sure people do,
Sure.
but I'm sure a lot of it is learning on the fly.
yeah.
Right.
And I think you run into the same sort of thing even if you've been practicing on smaller pot stills, at home on your stove. Probably a similar thing. Once you actually start playing with equipment that's more scaled for volume, it becomes a completely different process.
I mean,
That
I think
shouldn't
a new
stop
rec
the
is like
most
4
determined
floors.
amongst
Yes.
No.
So if you're just looking to get like alcohol that will get you drunk, I mean that's a pretty basic process. But if you're
Right.
actually looking to make something that tastes good, and then also won't kill you,
That's a big one.
What was your second question? Was more interesting, and I forgot.
Um,
Not more interesting, but it was.
How long
it
it
was
takes to
yeah,
make
how-
bourbon, right?
Yes.
So the legal definition of a bourbon, just to run through the whole thing, has to be at least 51% corn in the mash bill. Has to be aged in a single use. It's a new charred oak barrel, so you get it brand new. You can only use it once. It's a natural product. You can't add any flavorings or colorings to it. And then there's some technical requirements. It can't come off of the still at more than 160 proof, can't go into the barrel at more than 125 proof, has to be at least 80 proof in the bottle. So that in itself is the minimum legal definition of calling something a bourbon. There's no set minimum time period for calling something a bourbon as long as it's been in the barrel. So when you get into calling something a straight bourbon, that you get into the aging requirements. So a straight bourbon would have to be a minimum age of 2 years old. But if it's more than 2 but less than 4, you'd have to have an age statement on it saying how old it is. So if it's a minimum age of 4 years old, the youngest barrel that goes into that batch is 4, then you can call it a straight bourbon. You don't need to have an age statement on it.
Now, I know Western Kentucky is like the home of bourbon, but is there any actual appellation on that, or could someone in Washington State make bourbon?
Yeah, no, there's 95% of all bourbon is made in Kentucky, but legally it's just an American protected product. So it can be made anywhere in the United States.
So there's no Canadian bourbon?
No, there's no Canadian bourbon, but there could be like Hawaiian
Do
bourbon.
they actually care? Because like technically you can't make lambic or goose outside of the Bajotan land, but no one in America most people in America don't give a crap about that. So you still have, I don't want to call it Rivertown particularly, there's a lot of people who make lambics, but
Yeah.
Rivertown has a lambic. Do we enforce that, or do people in other countries actually care? Or can I get bourbon made in Japan, and Japan's just like, screw you?
I believe that there's people who will look at
Okay.
it and try and enforce it,
Yeah.
but it's probably
Or at
not.
least alcoholic fans like yourself, not
Yeah.
alcohol fans like yourself, will be like, we're not buying that because that's bullshit.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
bourbon fans have definitely gotten a lot more educated in the last few years as far as, wanting to know where does it come from. You say this is 5 years old, but you just opened last year. How is that possible?
And
Yeah.
currently, the big fights are not over the word bourbon. The big fights are over Tennessee whiskey. That's where the lawsuits are happening these days. But
Well,
Yeah.
before we unpack that
Yeah.
question, speaking of bourbons, let's try our next
absolutely.
whiskey.
Okay, so let's see. I think if we're going to go in the same, I'm going to go in this one. I don't want to put the gin and the bourbon in the same one. So we'll go to the bourbon next, and then maybe get a new glass for the gin. But.
While she's pouring that, I'll jump back to a very early question here, which is how we made it to 300 episodes. It's because she's willing to do her homework and really gets this stuff.
Well, she's doing a lot better than us.
Yeah.
Well, I will say Jesse's doing all this stuff, learning how to do things, and I just think of ideas and show up and
Oh,
bullshit.
I describe myself as her alcohol crash test dummy.
But you're the producer. Like I wouldn't have the tech side without you.
Oh yeah.
So it's full disclosure. This is the distillery I work for, but
So you work for Middle West Spirits,
Yes.
and is it OYO? Is that how you say
So
it?
we make OYO vodkas and whiskeys, and then we make the Vim and Pedal gin that just
Okay.
came out.
I knew OYO. I wasn't sure if there was
Yeah.
another one.
Yeah. So going forward, we will have more labels coming out under us. And I wanted to bring this one because this is a really nice one, actually.
I was gonna say, got some heat coming off of that.
So this is a sherry finished bourbon, and this is our bourbon is made completely in house. It's a wheated bourbon, so it's got wheat as the flavoring grain, just like the Pappy, and is the big famous one, Maker's Mark and Larceny, some of the more easily available ones. Which tends to be a little bit sweeter, and it interacts with the sherry really nicely. So this is 5 years in a full-size bourbon barrel, and then an additional year and a half in an Oloroso sherry cask. So nice age on it. This is one of the things that I do want to give a shout out for people who've been burned by craft distilleries and people bringing out products, especially whiskeys before they're ready. They're not, and they're not cheap either. You go and you spend $50 on a bottle. Yeah. It's really disappointing when you get it home and you're like,
right,
this isn't good. But we're starting to get into the age now where we're seeing enough small distilleries that have been around for a decent amount of time. They're getting some decent age on it. And it's going to be an exciting time to be a whiskey fan once those really start to come together, because they're going to be completely different flavor profiles. They're going to be things that you haven't had before. Up until recently, most of the bourbons that you could try were made by just a handful of distilleries and using very similar techniques and very similar mash bills. And, they each have their own unique flavor profile, but they're still fairly similar. And you're going to see a lot different flavor profiles coming out.
And locally, being a New Riff Ranger, a little plug for the New Riff there. New Riff, my God, the early tastings of some of the stuff that they've got that's coming. We're going to have a superstar here in our area.
Yeah,
I'm really proud.
I'm very excited for
what's coming out of New Riff, and they're stepping away from 8 Ball and focusing on.
Right.
I think they made a really wise choice.
I was just going to say, like, our
amazing.
loss in the brewing world with the end of 8 Balls, I think definitely going to be a gain there.
I think they made a strong choice.
But something you were saying about you've been around for 5 years, or you've been around for a year and you've got this 5-year-old stuff. How does that work? Because like George Remus, I know they have bourbon. They're supposedly in Cincinnati, but that's actually made by somebody else, right?
Yeah, so that's a Lawrenceburg. So the big distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, used to be Seagram's. Now it's owned by MGP.
What is MGP?
Manufactured Grain Products International, I think, is what it stands for. Or I could be wrong with
Sounds
it.
like some massive conglomerate.
Yeah, but they make some really good whiskey. They really do. And I would say if you go to the store right now and buy a rye whiskey off the shelf, just pick one at random, there's probably about 60 to 70% chance that it was made there.
Whoa.
They're making almost all of the craft rye whiskeys.
Imagine if Anheuser-Busch was willing to twist up its recipe and they put it in different cans.
So it's kind of like Stevens Point up in Wisconsin.
Right, it's like contract distilling.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they have never sold anything under their own name up until they just recently purchased the George Remus brand. So when Remus first came out, it's a Cincinnati-based brand, and it was a similar thing that we sent. They went and they said, we'd like to buy some barrels. We've got this great Cincinnati history of the George Remus, and we want to bring a whiskey to market that bears his name and that's going to like play up the Cincinnati history. And they said, okay, these are the barrels that are available. And when they first came out, I mean, they were not very good. I'll be honest. They were the first few batches were very young. They weren't great. But they stuck with it, and now that they've been purchased by MGP, now they've got a whole warehouse of things to play with. So I think the product level is going to go way up. But yeah, so that's if you ask them, they'll tell you that they don't necessarily put it on they don't lead with that as their story, but they'll be upfront about it if you ask them about it.
So you said like 60-70% of rye bourbons are made by them?
Rye whiskeys,
Rye whiskeys. So how many distillers really are, or how many big distillers are there? Are there like 10 companies making 90% of the spirits out there, or something
I
like that?
have the numbers. There are.
That's always been an interesting thing for me.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt, but going on like the bourbon show and everything, learning how it's like basically 3 families and maybe 5 recipes throughout all like the distilleries throughout there. Just like how small that world, is and was.
Yeah.
It's always so
I know
interesting.
far
to
less
learn.
about spirits than I thought. I'm slowly realizing, like, I thought I knew some stuff, like, nah.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the recent things, Beam Suntory, so
Right.
they have Jim Beam, but they also own Maker's Mark, so now they're owned by the same company.
Right.
And there's a lot of small batch things that are made by Beam, so Knob Creek and Basil Hayden and Booker's, those are all one distillery.
I wish we often talk in the craft beer world about transparency and how with Anheuser-Busch, InBev, Miller Coors, whatever they're calling themselves now, and then all the like venture capital firms buying everyone up, that you don't really know what you're buying anymore unless you're like a really tuned in beer nerd. Like,
Right.
There's sometimes even I get taken off guard that like I didn't know that was owned by.
I know
so-and-so.
I know a local guy. He is a giant Matry fan. He supports all our local breweries. He was in Seattle and he got excited about Elysium, and I was like, that's actually AB.
Yeah.
But it's even more opaque to me in the distillery world. Like
Yeah,
I oftentimes have no idea
Right.
who owns who, and I wish there was. It's not a knock against anybody because as long as you're putting out a good product, put out a good product. But I wish it was more clear on who owns what and how that all works. Because
And as I said a minute ago, I don't take offense at sourcing, but I do take offense. There is definitely a difference of people who are straight up and honest and people who kind of cloak it. If I hear one more story about how my grandpappy found this recipe, and when it's really MGP in the background and they're sourcing 100% and they really have no intention or are hoping maybe in a decade and they don't have this beautiful recipe that they're telling the public they do, or they do and they just haven't put it to use yet. It's when you want to cloak it in a marketing campaign and it's not really about the product you're doing. That's when I take offense a little bit, but that's just me.
So now, how different are these things, or what's the difference? Like, I've always enjoyed Basil Hayden's. I've always thought it was one of the preferred things I've had.
Yeah, love it.
I had no idea it was made by Beam. So I'm like, how fundamentally different? And like you were saying, like George Remus went in and picked barrels originally.
Right.
Was it like one recipe that got put into a bunch of different barrels and people picked their barrels they wanted, or are there different recipes? Or
Contract distilling can range from anything from saying, this is the mash bill that we want, basically just kind of using their people and their equipment with your own mash bill, and starting, from the beginning of the process to, going in and shopping like you're at a store and saying these are the things that are already finished and you're going to pick them up and take them out. So most of what MGP does, they have I think 2 or 3 mash bills and things that they like different profiles they do, and you can kind of choose between what they do.
Yeah, okay.
Of usually of already finished product.
From a beer perspective, that's insane.
well, no, that's something
Any
I
small
just,
brewery is going to have like 20 different mash bills, right?
Oh yeah, that's something I just love about like bourbon and whiskey and stuff, because like you can use the same recipe for make one thing of wort, put it in the barrel, and even just like the temperature and the height at which the barrel is saved at, it's a completely different whiskey. It's just dramatically different.
Yeah.
It's completely flip
Absolutely.
to what beer is. But before we move on to the next topic, we need to get on to the gin. We're
Yes.
running a little long
Yeah,
tonight.
sorry.
but-
Sorry.
We're talking
No, this is good. Like we're all about the
I don't have
good
the
discussion. so.
Charlie Rambles hashtag for no reason.
I think this is the second sherry finished bourbon that I've really enjoyed.
Nice.
Because
That's great.
This
Jefferson
honestly-
Groth cask sherry finish. I think that was delicious.
Yeah.
It was filtered through coffee filters, four-time coffee filtration.
Oh wow.
Interesting.
The bottle broke.
Huh.
We drove 16 hours over 2 days, and as we got out of the car at our final destination, the cooler the bottle was in fell, the bottle shattered. So we were pouring this this container through coffee filters
That's awesome.
into a plastic pitcher so we could drink it all week.
Yeah.
We were dedicated.
So now we're
this
drinking
is the last thing.
Yeah.
This is New Riff. So as I mentioned earlier, New Riff is going to be coming out with their whiskeys. They're waiting until they're a full 4 years old before they bring them out to market. So right now, none of the whiskeys they make there are ones that they've produced there. But the gin they do make. So it's a wild Kentucky gin. It's got a, they call it that because they do have some wild local botanicals in it. They use a Kentucky juniper, a goldenrod, and spice berries are the 3 local botanicals. And then they aged this in a used bourbon barrel. This was in for 7 months for this batch.
Yeah, the sour nerd in me got excited by wild.
Yeah.
But I also realized the stuff that makes beer sour would never survive in liquor. I mean, it caps out at a few percentage alcohol.
I normally can't stand gin.
That is the most common statement about gin. Yeah.
To me, it tastes like someone took, and not this. I'm saying gin in general. Gin in general to me tastes like someone took a Christmas tree and like shoved it down your throat
and that is
repeated.
Quite honestly, gin and mezcal, but gin phenomenally from a distilling creation perspective. Gin is my favorite thing on this earth right now, and has been for a couple of years because there's so much. It has a base palate.
Once the whiskey, sorry, go on.
Oh, it's okay. It has a base palate, and you can do so much with it. And if you work in barrel aging into the process, my God, some of the stuff they're doing out in Texas when they're barrel aging, and more locally now. I first discovered it in Texas, but my God,
that is nice.
Bourbon,
like that's a gin I can drink.
So yeah, if you are barrel aging, it actually brings the botanicals down a little bit. It's not as in your face, and then you get a little bit more sweetness and mellowness from the barrel. So these are really fun, and so New Riff is going to be doing some really good stuff in the next few years. You should definitely keep an eye on them.
So you were saying you're really excited by gin right now.
Oh, I love gin. I do, and I hated gin. But it was truly, I went out to San Antonio Cocktail Conference, I sat down at a gin panel, and they showed me, the kind of traditional English gin versus American gin versus some of the creative stuff they're doing. And they kind of explained to me how once you get that base palette, it's really like a painter's board. You can do anything with it.
Gin
you can go in
is,
so many different directions.
Gin is defined by the botanicals, so it has to be at least 51% juniper.
There's way too many glasses.
But yeah, you can do anything with the other 49%.
Yeah.
So
There's so much room for creativity.
So, I mean, in beer, IPAs are the hot things, or NIPAs, or whatever version of IPA is coming up next. From what I see, I feel like bourbon is the hot spirit of the day. Is that right? Or is it gin, or are vodkas coming back? Or I have no idea.
I would say once the whiskey nerds get tired of bourbon and rye, that I think a lot of the cocktail geeks, like gin is kind of the craft gin is another market that's expanding. So I'd say look out for that one as becoming more popular. But it also, I was surprised being outside of Cincinnati when I've gone to Chicago or New York, how little bourbon I saw on the back bar. I just
We're
thought
on
it
a
was
little bit of a
normal
bubble here
that-
where we
yeah.
are.
Right.
It's
I
like
would
being
agree,
talking to your Facebook friends.
When,
We're very
We're a
bourbon
self-reinforcing
here.
bubble that
Yeah.
gets some traffic up the river from Louisville.
Yeah.
Definitely, like I have a lot of friends in Chicago on my travels all over. Like bourbon is a delicacy. You can almost put it.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to get. It's expensive, and everybody loves it. But the 500-pound gorilla, it's always like vodka and then rum, and then those two are dancing about.
I think beautiful añejo tequilas and things that are coming out, and I think there's a lot of room for taste profiles.
What is that bourbon barrel tequila at the Turtle?
Horchata, Black Barrel, what's up with an H?
Yeah, oh my god, it's incredible.
It's so
I have a question before we go to the next segment and pause for station identification. Everyone always gives me crap for this.
okay.
All tequila tastes like chocolate to me. Tastes like dark chocolate. When I have it, it tastes kind of like if you have ever had like a really deep, rich, like real, 100% chocolate, hot chocolate. That's what it tastes like.
Have you had a stroke?
Does chocolate taste like tequila?
No, I don't smell almonds. I don't have like arsenic
good.
in it or
Okay,
whatever.
let's check.
But it's always like it's had like this like bitter, chocolatey taste to me, and I'm wondering like, am I just like some sort of alien,
Yes.
or is that like a thing that could be part of the tequila experience?
I can't say personally.
I can't say chocolate has been, because I get almost more of like sometimes almost more like a minty taste rather than a chocolatey taste.
I won't give you a shit about it, but I will say it's unique. Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's like a good taste because I don't really like dark chocolate, but it's always what it's tasted like to me. It's like a bitter, like high quality dark chocolate.
That's interesting.
I'll just have to drink some more tequila.
Well, I mean, I think maybe we can.
For many people who had bad tequila experiences in high school, it tastes like regret. So you're ahead of the pack. Yeah.
Yeah, gin barreled Stardust and tequila. They taste like regret.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Gin barrel Stardust.
Okay, calm down, guys.
You're the
Let's
one
not get
who come
started.
down
Let's
on
not
it.
get started.
We'll have a story for later. But if you're
That's
just
a
joining
non-live
us,
story.
we are Brew Minds, and we are joined tonight with the Charlie Tonic Hour celebrating their 300th episode
Thank you so
and
much.
all the awesome stuff that they're about to embark on. And this is a perfect time to talk about your thoughts on the local beer scene. We actually have some barrel-aged beers with us,
Yay.
keeping the rest in the fridge for when we need them. But we're gonna start. Off. This is a kind of an older thing from Braxton. It's the pot calling the kettle sour.
Okay.
It's a bourbon barrel-aged kettle sour. I've never had this, and I got it kind of almost through random through a trade that I did. We all pass our glasses around. Barrel aging, like the funny thing is, before I got into beer, I was really into. You're welcome. I was really into wine, and so I learned a lot about like viticulture and barrel aging process and all that. And then I came here and I got into bourbon, and then into beer. But one of the things I've always loved that kind of ties all of them together is the barrel aging process and how all of these industries can kind of work together. So I'm curious, with your guys' kind of background in spirits and cocktails and barrels and all that fun stuff, what you guys think of the local beer scene and the local craft beer barrel aging scene?
So we had, my heart is always with Mad Tree. We interviewed them very early, right when they were getting excited and realized they were going to be something, and they didn't really know
when
how
you
to
could
deal
actually
with it.
like walk in and sit down.
Yeah. Kenny, and we
Like
did
actually
all.
talk to
It was
people.
like year one, just when they were beginning to see a spike, and we had this beautiful interview with them on the show, and that has like endeared them to my heart.
No,
But
it is kind of like that, like you said. Once you get to know the owners
Yeah,
of the
I
place,
love Brady and Penny.
I do.
it's
yeah.
hard to lose your.
You're not a Jason author,
But
I
I adore. I'm just going to get mine out of the way.
Okay.
I adore Urban Artifact. I think the stuff they're doing there is phenomenal. I really appreciate what they're doing.
They've got one of those as well.
Yes. Yep. It's on deck.
Nice.
I have not made it over as often as I should, but every time I've been there, I really enjoyed Fibonacci. And I like the perspective of a really micro brewery in our city that's willing to stay
Have you done
microbrewery.
anything barrel aged?
No, I'm not talking barrel. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. We're talking barrel age. I apologize. I'll back off. You go.
No. I don't know if I have a whole lot more to contribute. I mean, Urban Artifact was definitely, as far as things I've had barrel aged.
So we're just talking about breweries we really appreciate.
You can work in that too, but it's an either or.
Yeah.
You can do both.
They're not exactly local, but I had a phenomenal Against the Grain barrel aged today at lunch. So it was a
No.
nice one.
Do you think one thing that's always kind of irritated me about the local beer scene, and it's nothing, I wouldn't say it's the local beer scene's fault, but we have this incredible access to all sorts of like bourbon barrels, wine barrels, all sorts of things. We have some really great breweries, but we just don't seem to get the recognition at all like the tournaments and everything that I think that we should. I'm curious if you think if that's a kind of a problem originating from the brewery side, or perhaps like a barrel sourcing thing. It just seems like we have the ingredients to have like amazing medal-winning beers, or it could be like a coastal bias. I don't know. Like there's a lot of discussion like when it comes to the Great American Beer Festival and the competition there, that breweries from like the Rocky Mountain states have an implicit advantage just based on, you got to send whatever your product is hundreds of miles. It's going to age and it's going to sit there. But I really feel, we can bring up Listerman. Like did you hear that they won FOBAB? But we've got a few medal winners out there. I think 50 West won World Beer Cup for one of their barrel aged products. But
the Going Plat Scotch Ale.
Yeah, we have such an opportunity. What do you think is the missing link for us to finally be recognized for the amazing work that our local, brewers and distillers are doing?
I I have no idea what to say to this. I'm just going to be completely honest.
I think not just quality of beer, but I think, Cincinnati is beginning to get a national reputation as being actually a damn cool city. And I think when a lot of, they did a big national assessment of what the opinions of Cincinnati were before they started kind of a rebranding campaign that I was involved with for the city. Guerrilla Cinema did like a kickoff event for it, and the big results of that was they didn't have a negative opinion of Cincinnati. They didn't have a positive opinion. They had a very neutral, we don't care about Cincinnati opinion. And I think
I guess that's good.
Yeah,
it's better than if they hate us.
Right.
Yeah, but
it's better than being Dayton.
I mean, we're known for, as a city, for not being very funny. We're very stoic. We're very what we are. And I think that's crap. And I think just as the food scene and the culture scene and the art scene and people around the nation are beginning to figure out, I think when you come to awarding medals, it is also about the place where it comes from. And I think we don't have that gravitas nationally, but we're beginning to. And I think I think there's an implicit bias by the city that it comes from.
I do wonder if, and I don't know for sure, but my thought would be, do you need to practice with barrels as far as barrel aging? Do you need to kind of do it for a few years before you really kind of to get it really, you really know what you're doing? Because we're as much as we're a huge craft beer city, we're still fairly young craft beer city.
Yeah.
I mean, there was not that many breweries in Cincinnati, 8 years ago.
Yeah, we went from 8 to 42
Yeah.
in 7 years.
I know. Yeah.
And the barrel aged beer has kind of followed the bourbon boom also to some degree. It's been, you see a lot more of it now than you used to, as far as people wanting to do that.
Yeah. But we're going to have our burials. We're going to have the people who come out and give that national respect. Sorry, I mean to overstep on.
No, that's really right. That I was going to kind of.
Yeah, I got the subtle elbow. Let Tom speak.
No, I was going to echo that. Is that I'm a transplant to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's always kind of seemed to have a crutch on its shoulder. But after living here for 10 years now, I really do feel like it's a city that deserves a lot more respect and recognition than it gets. And I think until it gets that, it's not going to really grow up. Like our beer scene's not going to grow up. Our distilling's not going to grow up. And culturally, we need that to take it to the next level.
And it's okay. If it doesn't grow up right away, then all this wondrous stuff that we have in Cincinnati, we get to keep and enjoy. It doesn't get farmed out and sucked up by the rest of the nation. And if they want to wait and play catch up with us and figure out what cool shit we got going on, stuff we got going on here.
We curse all the time.
Okay, good. Just make sure.
How long have you known me?
I know. just check.
It's a family-friendly alcohol.
Yeah. Exactly. It's they. I'll just enjoy it until they come over and see what good stuff we're doing.
I mean, I'm not huge on defending Cincinnati often. I think we're solidly in a upper middle class tier of cities.
Yeah.
Are we one of the best? No, but there's a lot of cities our size out there, and who the fuck cares about half of them?
Yeah.
And who the fuck does somebody in Phoenix care about Cincinnati? Whereas it's easy to think about cities like Portland or New Orleans or Asheville or Denver.
Yeah.
Right? Those are top tier cities. We're not that bad.
Yeah.
No, we're great.
That's gonna be our new slogan.
We're not that bad.
Nobody dislikes us. Yeah.
You don't like us, but you don't dislike us.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, I guess with you working with Middle West and you over at Guerrilla Cinema,
Right.
Are there any that you've kind of got your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the local entertainment scene? Are there any projects that you're excited for coming up with, like when it comes to like either barrel aged beer or spirits or anything that kind of our fans should keep an eye out for?
I feel like our bar scene is really coming alive in a lot of ways. I feel like there's a lot of creativity happening in that area, not just full disclosure because I work for 3 bars in the city and do events, but I think there's a lot of things that are happening and we're pushing each other, not just my bars and the ones I work with, but all across the city to create interesting experiences. And I think there's a lot of that going on in the city. But in terms of stuff going on, I mean, just I remain very excited about the beer scene. I mean, the beer scene is phenomenal here, and I love that I go out and I try things, and I go to places like the Lucky Turtle, and I can try like things from all over, and it's just we've got so much perspective on what's going on in the rest of the world, and we get this great local culture mixed with all the things that we import to the area, and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
you can give a better answer than I can. Yeah.
So I do definitely. I'm excited about some of the stuff that New Earth is doing, because they're doing something that we haven't seen before, and I don't want to get too technical, but they make all of their whiskeys on a column still, which is pretty unusual for a distillery. I mean, New Earth is huge for a new distillery. That is, it's been fairly unheard of. Most of the new distilleries, that are these craft distilleries, they're all on pot stills. But most Kentucky bourbon is made on a column still. So to have somebody coming out and doing like new recipes and new mash bills and more creative things, but doing it using the Kentucky method, making it on a column still, they're going to be completely unlike anything else that you have on the market. And some of the stuff I've seen them put back as I've been there, they're pretty exciting. There's a bourbon that they made using blue Indian corn instead of yellow corn. So having that in the mix, they've done some single malt whiskeys. They've done some wheated bourbon. They've also done a bourbon that was 100% malted. They found somebody to malt their corn, so it's malted corn, malted rye, and malted barley as the mash bill. So we're going to see how that turns out.
That's pretty weird. That's awesome.
So there's all these like really unusual mash bills and things that they're being experimental with, but they're doing it using a very traditional, high quality process in using the column still. I won't get into why the column still is different, but it's going to be really exciting.
Well, speaking of new things coming up, we've got a little bit of time left. So, when I say a little bit of time, I mean we've gone completely over. So
that's
we're just going to try to fit it in.
It's not that bad.
You say you're with Gorilla Cinema. I hear you guys have a karaoke bar.
We do. So
coming
we
up,
have we do funky bars, and they're nationally recognized because they're cool and they're different. We do the Overlook Lodge, which is a Shining theme bar. We do the Video Archive, which is a Quentin Tarantino inspired bar. But Tokyo Kitty, which is opening December, January, somewhere right in there. It is a Japanese-inspired karaoke bar. If you kind of take it from that lost in translation perspective, where it's an American dropped into the Japanese culture and they're overwhelmed by the neon and they're all that kind of crazy experience. So that is kind of the inspiration for what will be Tokyo Kitty downtown Cincinnati.
Please tell me you're going to have the giant mecha dance robo show like they do over in Tokyo.
We have. Well, I don't know that. Okay, I could say yes. When is the question? As an events director, I will say yes because I know exactly what you're talking about. That would work perfect. But we haven't planned that yet. But I'll always say yes.
I will tell you that will be like the biggest night you guys will ever do. There are so many anime and otaku moods here that it'll just.
And that's just it. It's like everybody thinks about a karaoke bar and they think, okay, we're going to go and we're going to sing in front of a big crowd. And that's the thing that we kind of tried to capture from the Japanese experience with Tokyo Kitty is it's small room,
private lounge,
small room karaoke.
Yes.
So there's going to be a series of small rooms. We're also going to have kind of that dance club vibe. So it's not going to be constant karaoke. You'll have a karaoke person come up and sing, and then there'll be music dancing for a while. And
just
then
to be clear, so like, there's a public area which will be mostly a dance club with karaoke dropped in, but more curated karaoke, so it's more of the dance tunes.
And in the
you're not gonna have somebody get up and like do Total Eclipse of the Heart like in the middle of the set while you're like, oh, I can't do this anymore.
yeah.
But then the smaller rooms you can do whatever you want.
And the other exciting thing is the robot.
Robot bartender.
We got robot. It's not a robot bartender.
It's a
robot delivery system, really.
Bars.
You'll be able to sit in your room and order a drink on your iPad and have it come through the ceiling and come down to your table and be delivered. And then yes, it's amazing.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We always got to do things a little bit different and project a little wonder. But full disclosure, Ginny and I are small investors in this bar.
Oh,
so
congratulations.
I have to disclose that. Yeah, we are partial.
We're terrible, actually.
We're micro bar owners. Yeah.
We're terrible guests.
Yeah.
No. That's good. Like we appreciate the disclosures. I think that's important
it's
when it
legit.
comes to blogging.
It's
It
legit.
is, and that's what I always tell people as far as working for Middle West Spirits. I'm not a good enough salesperson to sell something I didn't like. Like I ended up working for them because I remembered reviewing their products and really liking it back in the day, and that's when I reached out to them. I couldn't do that for somebody I didn't believe in. We wouldn't be investing in something we didn't believe in. So
Right.
Now, one of the other Gorilla things is the video archive, right?
Yeah.
And that blew up recently because Kevin Smith stopped by.
Yeah, we bugged him. We bugged him enough, and then he came by. I actually was the one on Twitter that was pinging him almost daily, trying to get him there because we knew he was going to be in town. We knew he was going to be kind of doing a show, and we knew he was doing another show in Lexington the next day, and he'd have this controlled period where he was going to be bored, and we said we were going to do a Kevin Smith Film Festival that day, and we were going to give 10% to his charity, the Wayne Foundation, which goes against human trafficking. And we said basically, if you show up and you work the video counter out front of our place, we'll give 100% to what you do. And he not only showed up, but you expect Kevin Smith to have like handlers and a crew. He literally, one of our bartenders saw him out there driving down the street looking for the bar, hanging out a window, and he came in, and he was one of the greatest celebrities to deal with and be a part of, because he came in, he bought the bar around, he hung out. He met with everybody. He took selfies. He toured the place. He Facebook Live from there for 15 minutes. He was, he hugged me deeply and intimately. And
he was like, that was the greatest moment of my life. I'm sorry, I know we just got married.
Yeah.
But Kevin's hugging me.
Yes. We had a chasing Amy moment right there. But it was great. But no.
Wait, Jay wasn't there? They didn't go back to the hotel and paint miniatures all night for thousands of dollars?
Honestly, he was great. But we've been blessed from travel magazines to CNN to Wall Street Journal. We've had so much written up about our bars on a national level that I am really proud of that.
It's still, to pitch my business that I work for a little bit, on Fox 19's CincyWeekend.com, that is still one of our best videos that we did, the walkthrough, and I can't remember the name of it, but we did a walkthrough there at the video archive.
I remember that.
And,
actually,
it was like the $5 shake or something like that.
Yeah.
It worked really well.
I will totally give credit to Reddit. Reddit changed our life. Because somebody just like that.
I usually say that positively.
I do. Because we opened.
Normally it's like I had to change my name and move to a new city. But
We opened. We were doing really well. But what happened was somebody randomly stopped by and shot the video wall opening, because it's a video store, and walked in and did just a 40-second video, and we trended #1 on Reddit worldwide for 24 hours.
Wow.
And
that's incredible.
That changed.
Yeah. I mean, the fickleness of Reddit for like 10 minutes to trend is pretty good.
It was amazing. So literally, when that happened, our phones were all blowing up, because it's like people were just pouring into the bar. People were walking in pajamas. It was just amazing because they saw it on Reddit. It's like, this bar exists in our city, and it was
Well, so you said Tokyo Kitty is going to be downtown.
Yeah.
Overlook is in Pleasant Ridge.
Yes.
Yep. Where's the video archive?
Walnut Hills.
Okay.
Yes, we go into very wonderfully new areas where people wouldn't necessarily go. That's one thing we're kind of proud of.
I would say I love Pleasant Ridge now.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I remember years ago it was like mind blowing.
Walnut Hills is awesome.
And
we got Gomez, we got all the different things going on down there, and it's coming alive too.
I need to get down there, but Pleasant Ridge blew me away last week or 2 weeks ago. The Share cheese bar was delicious.
Oh my God, I love share cheese.
Casa Fig.
Casa Fig,
Yeah.
Casa Fig.
So freaking good.
Yeah.
Had some beers at Nine Giant, and then had a cocktail at Overlook. Like, that was a fantastic evening.
Oh my
And,
God.
just walking around, this is all within like 2 blocks.
Share
Free
cheese.
parking.
Share cheese is amazing. They do these boxed flights of cheese where you can just buy, and it's like a
Yeah, yeah.
lava.
Flight of cheese was incredible.
It was unbelievable. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I'm geeking out on that one, because that one.
Well,
and
no,
then we got a box. And we went over to Lucky
she was
Turtle,
Lucky Turtle,
and we drank beer from all over and ate the cheese. I could cry. I was having such a good time. It was great.
Well, but I guess before we go, you guys want to recap a little bit about what's going on with the Charlie Tonic Hour for everybody there at home?
Yeah.
So yes, Charlie Tonic Hour.
Find us at charlietonic.com.
Your
3
new-
podcasts.
New old alcohol-based Cincinnati.
Yes. When you want to know about alcohol, when you want to rebuild and restart your life, come to charlietonic.com. We will reboot you with a drink.
Yeah, that's
There you go.
I like that. Yeah.
We might just find a new hashtag.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
and-
you guys for coming.
Thank you
for
for having
sure.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Yeah, we love you guys.
And for those of you at home, always remember to watch us at Brew Minds on Facebook. You can also go to brewminds.com. And I'm Jesse.
I'm Tom.
And Ginny and Charlie, thank you for coming
Thank
and
you.
hanging out with
Thank
us.
you.
And
Thank you
for
for having
everyone at
us.
home, just keep watching. We're going to be tomorrow. We will be at Brink Brewing in North College Hill to talk about is there a craft beer bubble in
Yes.
Cincinnati. Not a bubble, it's a course correction. But we'll have that debate for everyone tomorrow. Please come out. I think the fun starts at
7:30.
7:30.
That's turning into a big event, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
going to be. Yeah.
Exciting.
I saw Brett from River Artifact sharing it today.
Yeah, it's-
they were on Fox 9 this morning.
Yeah.
Channel 12 reached out to him. I'm like, I don't know how to moderate things.
Well, you're gonna
You got
get
24
all
hours
the
to learn.
explosion tomorrow. But once again, thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay tuned to Brew Minds.